Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming tonight. By the way, what day is today?
First day of spring.
That was yesterday, actually.
Oh.
Today's the day after the first day of spring. Good guess. Anyway, my name is Rob. I organize Idea to IPO. We've been doing events in Silicon Valley for many, many years. We hold events multiple times a week from San Jose to San Francisco, and we always have a busy calendar of events. I would like to highlight one event that's coming up, Tuesday, March 26th, how to negotiate with venture capitalists and win. That's all the way up in San Francisco for Embarcadero Center, 12th floor. Check out the details for that event and all of our events on our website, ideatoipo.com. We launched officially on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members and no events on our calendar. At this stage, we have over 60,000 members among all our meetup groups in the Bay Area. We've completed over 2,000 events. We're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in Silicon Valley, bar none. Yeah. It's a little witty, but that's okay. I'll take it tonight. Our mission is to promote entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurs, build community, and provide value in the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem. To that end, we provide content that is practical, actionable, and relevant, stuff that you can actually use to succeed as entrepreneurs. We believe in building community because Silicon Valley is an aspirational ecosystem. It attracts people from all over the world who come here to do great things. Who here is not originally from Silicon Valley? Cool. Who here was born and raised in Silicon Valley? 2 of you. Well, welcome. 3 of you. So whether you were born and raised in Silicon Valley or just arrived last night, it is important for us to provide multiple channels for you to meet people, build relationships, and grow your network. So in addition to our content-oriented events throughout the week, we also have some fun social events on Friday nights, and they're hosted by various team members. And tomorrow it's being hosted by Albert Chen, one of our team members. So let's hear it for Albert. Applause.
Welcome everybody, I'm Albert and I host the TGIF Mixer events. We have one going on tomorrow at the Santa Clara Hyatt Regency. Starts at 8 o'clock, so please feel free to RSVP on the meetup page. And I'm also the founder of Albert's List, so if any of you are looking to hire or looking for your next opportunity, we have a community of 37,000 people here in the Bay Area. We're the most active jobs group, bar none, so come talk to me.
Bar none, huh? Nice phrase. With regard to value, it is important that we provide value at each and every one of our events. Not just value for your money, which is important, because we know many entrepreneurs are struggling financially, so we make sure our events are affordable, and if you cannot afford the cover charge, for whatever reason, come talk to me and we can work something out. Most importantly, though, at each and every one of our events, we want to make sure that we provide value for your time, which is your most valuable resource. Is anyone here getting any younger, besides our panel? Probably not. So when you invest your valuable time to come to our events, we want to make sure that you maximize your ROI. We have many, many partners that help us do what we do. Law firms, venture capital firms, angel investor groups, incubators, accelerators, colleges, universities, co-working spaces. Tonight, we're grateful to Wilmer Hale for hosting us at this beautiful venue. Is this a beautiful venue? Yes. So let's hear it for Wilmer Hale. And also providing us with an awesome moderator, which you'll soon discover. We have many other partners here tonight. I would also like to have them be acknowledged and have them come up and say a few words. Let's hear it for Mike at CTO 911. Applause.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, my name is Mike. I run CTO 911, which is a consulting company that help entrepreneurs here in Silicon Valley. I've been helping entrepreneurs from conceptualizing the idea to see if it works, and then taking that from just a concept in your head to paper to design to mock-ups and all the way to building the architecture and then assembling the team to execute it.
So we'll build software, different SaaS, software as a service applications for companies in real estate, education, and also we'll be doing some AI work as well for companies that are doing data science. So grab a card when you're out, or come shake my hand. I'll be glad to talk to you about your ideas. Thank you. All right, next up we have Ollie from Planner.ai. Applause.
Thank you. We work on autonomous tutors. What is that? It's a tutor that is available 24/7 and can answer students' unique and contextual questions instantly. If you would like to learn more, please find me in the back. I would love to chat. Thank you.
All right, next we have Josh from 42. Applause.
Everyone, I'm with 42 Silicon Valley. We're a completely free project-based coding school. If you want to learn anything else about us, please feel free to talk to me afterwards. I'll be at the table in the back left. Thank you.
Free is good, right? Next up we have Kafaz and No GPS. Applause.
Thank you. Yeah, this is no GPS technology I have invented. It gives you geolocation without satellite communication. Your battery tells you about where you are, or your wall tells you where you are, or your road you're driving tells you where you are. So you don't need expensive, current-heavy satellite communication to know your location. You can tell it by sensors and artificial intelligence. That is equal to new no GPS technology. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Amy from Women's Blockchain Initiative. Let's hear it for Amy. Applause.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amy Cowan, and I am with Women's Blockchain Initiative. And what we do is we connect and support women in the blockchain industry, along with connecting to VCs and other event organizers. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you.
So though our mission in Silicon Valley is to support entrepreneurs locally, our global mission is to democratize entrepreneurship and innovation all around the world. To that end, we maintain a robust YouTube channel, youtube.com/idea-to-IPO. Go check it out. We have tons of videos there. We've documented and archived many of our events. And this rich, valuable content is available on demand, anytime, anywhere, totally free of charge. That's whether you're in Palo Alto, San Francisco, New York, Maui, Moscow, or Timbuktu. Our partner in this grand endeavor is Tim Jeggers of Jeggers Films, one of the top professional videographers in Silicon Valley. Let's hear it for Tim. Applause.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm Tim. I am the video partner. I've been producing content for Rob's events for several years now. I also specialize in photography and just general content creation for anything from social media to your websites. And I mostly do event coverage from meetup groups to conferences and conventions. I also do some real estate, weddings, training videos. You name it, I have probably done it over the last 10 years of my professional career. And if you have any questions about where to find this content or questions about any other content I might be involved with, feel free to ask me later. I will be roaming all around. Thanks for having us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's the schedule for the rest of the evening. We're going to launch right into our panel discussion. Our panel will deliver an informative, compelling, entertaining, dynamic discussion, right? Audience members, hold your questions. The discussion will go on until 8 p.m. At 8 p.m., we're going to open it up to audience members with questions. We're going to have a line here, and we would like you to come up and use the lectern and the mic because we're recording this for our YouTube channel. If at any time you need to get up and use the restrooms, it's okay. Just get up. It's a very casual environment. 8:30 p.m., we're going to end the formal program. You can stick around, network, socialize, connect, talk to our panel. As a courtesy to Wilmer Hale, we need to leave the building by 10 minutes before 9. If you would like to continue the conversation, we have an informal after party that's going to be happening at the Park James Hotel, 1400 El Camino Real. It's just down the street on El Camino. It's the new Rosewood. So anyway, that's the schedule for the rest of the evening. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our distinguished moderator. He's one of the top corporate startup attorneys in Silicon Valley. He's an associate at this prestigious firm, and he is passionate about helping entrepreneurs succeed. So let's give it up for Eric Hansen.
Thanks so much, Rob. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. We have a really cool topic ahead of us. We're going to talk robotics, so getting into the world of science fiction, and we have an awesome panel here to talk about it. So just to kind of lead things off, I thought I'd read the room a little bit and see who we have and what folks are into. So why don't I do just a show of hands to see who's here. First, do we have any founders of startups? All right, good percentage. How about employees at a startup? Not a lot. Employees at a big company, big tech company. All right. Government employees? No. Researchers? Academic? All right, good stuff. Lawyers? Give it up. All right, good. How about media? Bloggers, writers, all right, so we got a good mix here. And then anyone who's looking to start a startup down the road. All right, good stuff. So today we're gonna be talking about robotics, and give you a little view of what we're seeing in the marketplace in terms of the next wave of startups in robotics, what's worked and what hasn't. And give you a taste of what everyone's sort of excited about here. So I'm going to run down the panel and ask everyone to sort of introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what they do and their thesis and what they see in the near term. So we'll start it at the high level and then we'll get into more granular detail beyond that. So why don't I start with Kelly Chen over at DCVC.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly. I'm a principal at Data Collective. We are an early stage deep tech firm based here in the Silicon Valley. Early stage as in our sweet spot is seed and series A. And then on the deep tech side, we're focused on companies that use hard engineering and hard science to solve large global problems. So in terms of our focus in robotics, we've been investing out of this deep tech thesis since the inception of our fund. We're now over $1 billion AUM, we're 7 funds in, and robotics continues to be a large part of what we do. And I personally focus on robotics, manufacturing, logistics, and a lot of the future of work applications here. My background before venture, I used to run a fixed income derivatives trading desk back in New York. And then I went on to build out a brand new product line, derivatives trading desk for a global investment bank. I've always been interested in the quantitative side, so always interested in automation, optimization. And then my academic background, I have 2 engineering degrees and an MBA.
My name is Nuno Goncalves Pedro. I have to apologize for my voice, but Rob knows that I wouldn't miss it for the world, so this is my sign of commitment. I have a background as an engineer, product manager, and then reformed operator. I guess I'm still an entrepreneur, so I can't say I'm a reformed entrepreneur. At a different point in time, maybe we should do a talk about the myths of being a venture capitalist. And you guys will realize that actually for all the sexiness of our roles, sometimes it's not that sexy. And my day job is I'm a venture partner at Grishin Robotics. We are a Sand Hill Road firm focused very much at the intersection of the physical and digital worlds and at the revolution that we perceive is happening there. Our sweet spot is Series A investments. We opportunistically do Series C and Series B. And we have a couple of really ground topics that we run around: next generation of work, next generation of mobility, next generation of the home, next generation of entertainment and media. and next generation of retail. We've made a few investments that you might have heard about, like Zoom Pizza around food tech, Starship, Zipline around last mile, companies like Spin that sold to Ford. So we've done a bunch of that. As you'll also realize, we don't only do robotics in the classic sense of it. We'll have that discussion later on, hopefully tonight. And we're very focused on consumer, which is also a little bit of a throw for most people. So we will opportunistically do B2B. We very rarely would do industrial. So we mostly do consumer. Because I have plenty of time on my hands, and I wonder why I get sick. I also on weekends do micro venture investments out of a family office called Strive Capital, and we do mostly very early deep tech around AI and blockchain, or very late enterprise software like Gusto or Rubrik, which were two of the investments we did last year.
Thank you. My name is Elena Lien. I'm the investment director from Intel Capital. I have an engineer background, geek at heart, started a couple of startups, learned a lot of great lessons learned. And after that, I joined Intel Capital since 2010. Intel Capital, we invest annually $400 million we're a very thesis-driven investment firm, including autonomous of everything, robotics, AI, IoT. My key focus area of investment is AI, robotics, and IoT-related devices.
Hey guys, Brandon, early stage investor at Lux Capital. So Lux has been around for roughly 2 decades. We manage $1.5 billion of AUM. Current fund is $400 million to do primarily Series A investments, so $5 to $15 million entry point checks. But we do lots of seeds and opportunistically Series Bs. In terms of the thesis or the thematic focus, we try to use new technologies at big pointed, large global problems. So if you look at the Fortune 500, we always ask, how do you reinvent a new sector of the economy? So many times our companies are not competing with the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, but call it the GEs or the Raytheons, or we try to reinvent large new sectors of the economy. My background has been in investing for, call it, the past 4 or 5 years, was an engineer before that, and once upon a time was a researcher.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Nuno, why don't you kick us off with the next question on the agenda? How do you define robotics? What is it to you? Is it something that I program and it just runs itself? Where does it operate? What's the next phase going to look like?
So we have a very broad definition of what it is. And actually, when I first joined the firm, I used to have this discussion with our founding partner, where I was like, why are we called robotics? I mean, we don't only do robotics. We invested in Ring that sold to Amazon, we invested in Eero, et cetera, et cetera. And so his explanation is finally, winning me over. It's difficult to win over another VC. But he's finally winning me over is, it's really the discipline where you have all these different techniques and engineering parts that are coming together, right? So it's mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, material sciences, software engineering, all coming together for a solution that normally has a representation that is not just physical. And so that's our definition of robotics, and that's where sort of all our portfolio, almost all our portfolio of investment fits today. So that's how we see it. So we really don't buy into the whole robots have to be some sort of anthropomorphic type beings, right? Or they have to have an arm, or they have to have a body, etc. I think that's something we just use to get a little bit of a warm and fuzzy feeling about that. Maybe we will have some in the future. Maybe that will be general robotics in some ways for the home, etc. But that's not what we buy into.
Elena, tell me what's a priority for Intel? Are you in the consumer or in industrial enterprise type space, or is there opportunity everywhere?
Opportunities everywhere. We're stage agnostic. I would say more of our focus is around B2B side, definitely. If we look at from the robotic perspective, right? If I look at horizontal technology, robotic, and the vertical different sectors, a lot of the processing power with today's machine learning, bringing the computing to the edge, to the data, that's a lot of interlining with Intel's internal development in terms of bringing the computer vision and AI and different kind of things to the edge. And we tie very closely to that. both from horizontal perspective, from sort of the sensing the element to processing the element to actuate, make action of element, developing developer tool from the ROS operating system, etc., to the vertical segment where there's loads of data coming in, all the different vertical segments, and all the different vertical segments have different robotic solutions, potentially with, for instance, with our Movidius computer vision ADS processing power, or with our RealSense sort of 3D sort of vision for picking and grabbing type robotics to the different edge computing, AI accelerator type of place.
So that's pretty fascinating. Can you give me like an example of something that's in the marketplace right now that's sort of integrating all those technologies, or will be in the marketplace, that is sort of bringing that all together into a concrete product I can point to?
So one example in robotic company would be one of my portfolio companies called Barcelona. They're today publicly announced deployed in 50 Walmart stores. Those are the robots running around while you and I are shopping in the Walmart stores, and they scan the shelves. You mentioned you have the retail focus. But today, imagining this is a job that associates hate to do. They would hold a barcode scanner, scanning the barcode for, in Walmart, maybe there's 10,000 SKUs a year. And it's just a job that no one likes, and it's prone to errors. There's short of labor, there's churn rate in the retail side, where the robot is roaming around with self-navigation capability, with a stack of camera and computer vision and machine learning to train out, spot out the sort of out-of-stock misplacing items, bringing that information right to the associate on the smart device, where they could do multiple churn on the inventory, which is solving a huge problem Walmart's having today. That's one example of robotic integrated with navigation as well as AI processing on the edge.
That's fascinating. Kelly, you and I talked before this about trucking. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we're pretty excited about the logistics industry, and we think about logistics in terms of everything from sorting to packing to shipping all the way to the end delivery. And we have robotics investments in pretty much all of those sectors. And something that we talked about ahead of this was the transportation layer. So we're investors in a company called Embark Trucks, and they do autonomous long-haul trucking. So in the trucking industry, it's a $1 trillion industry. A third of that industry comes from labor. And we're seeing a big lack in labor in the long haul space because it's a grueling job with long hours. It takes people away from their families for months. So Embark Trucks is they've done the longest autonomous route from the East Coast to the West Coast of any company out there. And we're pretty excited for what this could mean for the labor market. So basically now, instead of having the drivers do the long haul, they're only there for the last mile so they can stay close to their home, and they're working on the harder parts and letting the autonomous part take over the easy part to silver.
So hard question for maybe Brandon. Does that make you optimistic or pessimistic?
I mean, everyone thinks I'm the Debbie Downer of the group is what we concluded over dinner. I mean, it's all temporally related on time frames. I think long term, I'm super optimistic. I think there's a utilitarian aspect that yes, these are gruesome jobs. Lots of the macro indicators say there's labor shortages. You can over time retrain people, give them higher impact things to do. I think in the short term that there will be a transition period and some pain. The example I tend to use is we look back at the Industrial Revolution quite favorably as a period of kind of macro hypergrowth. It kind of brought a lot of huge amounts of GDP wealth creation. But during the time, there was a 60-year wage stagnation in the Industrial Revolution, and it was quite painful in Great Britain. It was the de-skilling of many high-skilled jobs. So I think we will look back, whether it's 20, 50, or 100 years from now, quite positively. I think we have to be very, very cognizant in this transition and how we do this transition.
Elena, what do you think about that?
I agree with Brandon in the long-term and short-term perspective. In the long term, I do believe that if I look at a decade or two from now, I do believe in the disruptive nature. I do believe we'll see robots everywhere, from manufacture to warehouse automation, to logistics, to retail, to in-the-home consumer side. I do believe in that view in the long run. In the short term, I do think there's a lot of challenge, right? There's a standardization, the interoperability of standards. There's a different regulatory related and how people perceive robots, from the science fiction robot to the Black Mirror of the robots assassinating humans. So there's a lot of different short-term challenges from both technological perspective and market adoption speed perspective. We see a long sales cycle in the enterprise environment. There's, in the short term, definitely there's a lot of exciting opportunity to disrupt, to improve.
Is it easier to sell to consumers than to enterprises when you're coming out with a new technology in this world?
I wouldn't say it's easier. It's certainly different. And in some ways, I spent a significant part of my career around the mobile and consumer mobile space. It's actually becoming incredibly similar. And the dynamics of user acquisition are becoming similar. The way you look at the patterns of how users use the services is becoming very similar. We always ask for cohort analysis and funnel analysis on a first meeting, right? People look at us like we're from Mars. It's like, yeah, because I need to know if your users are actually using what you've put out there. It's not that you just sold 1,000 pieces of kit. It's like, what are they doing with it? So in some ways, it's very similar to consumer. I think it's a market where the outright successes in many of these areas, are more far and in between. So there's much higher risk, probably, how you look at the space. But at the same time, it's like if you have a big breakthrough, you conquer a market. We saw that with Ring, right? So for us, it's a little bit, we do think there's absolutely no doubt in our minds that user experiences from consumers fundamentally are going to change very dramatically. They already did, and I think the next 10 to 20 years we're going to have a huge shift. And in some ways, we were talking earlier, what's the next big platform, the next big shift? We think this is it, actually. We're sort of in the midst of it, and everyone talks about AI, and I'm very bullish on AI, by the way, and I think AI is going to transform a lot of stuff. But in some ways, the physicality of consumer and also of enterprise experiences and industrial experiences is up for grabs. And that's what we fundamentally believe in at this stage.
So one of the biggest differences that we see on the enterprise versus consumer side, and for us, we invest almost exclusively on the enterprise side, is that enterprises, although there's a slow sales cycle, like how they make their decision is very concrete and ROI based. And then on the consumer front, if you're looking at selling things that aren't just like a functional robot, like a vacuum robot. If you're looking at something that might take a more emotional need, like we're looking closely into the eldercare space, like the consumer sentiment through a lot of surveys is that they don't quite trust it yet. So in terms of enterprise, it's a very concrete thing, slow sales cycle. On the consumer side, I think for certain needs, absolutely, robotics will come in fast. And for other ones, like emotional needs, I think that will take a while.
And I just and that's precisely why we say we don't believe in anthropomorphic forms, right? Ring, for us, is a robotics play because in some ways, we totally agree with what you're saying. People will not trust this thing that is at the home that has arms and can do things to you. You're like, why, right? But they will trust a thing that looks just like a doorbell, but it's actually not, right? And so that's our thesis in some ways.
So I want to challenge the notion that Ring is a robotics product, and I can do that because I'm a lawyer who was a computer science major back in the day. So convince me that it fits within the robotics category.
It uses all the disciplines. It uses all the disciplines that formulate the definition of a robot. If you just actually literally Google it on Wikipedia, it uses engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, material sciences, computer engineering to develop a solution that's fully embedded. Is an ATM a robot or not? For example. Sure. It is, right? But in the old days, and this is again, I'm using an analogy from our founding partner at Grishin Robotics, everyone probably at the beginning thought it was going to be looking like a person dispensing the money, right? But it's not. It's a machine. And some machines are tiny, some machines are a bit bigger, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we think through it. And certainly, again, we're consumer guys, so for us, we can say whatever we want. The people that are investing in industrial, normally there's an arm and there's conveyors and there's a process with a factory. And so for them, the definitions, I think, of the metaphor sometimes are a little bit more limited by nature in some ways.
So, as an investor, how do you, I'm sure you see more companies that you can invest in the space, and I'll throw this out to Brandon. Let's say you have a consumer product, you know that you need some element of trust and adoption by the consumer. What are you looking for? Like, how do you know that it's there?
I mean, it's a tough question because I think for all these things, right, it's hard to give general advice and it's always idiosyncratic to the company. The challenge with the funding environment in consumer robotics is many times for the stage we invest, we have to make a bet before that is a known thing. So, I mean, some of this is platitudes, but part of it is the DNA of the team. Do you believe in the product? I mean, sometimes the product's out in the market, but many times you have to have that leap of faith. So it comes down to, is this a personal pain point for us? We saw Ring early on, and we passed on it when it was called Modbot. It was a different name, and we missed the use case, and it turned out everyone else saw the use case. So I think it's hard to give a general statement, but it's always idiosyncratic to the company.
So, do you have companies that come in and you just see it and you're like, okay, there's no market for this yet, but I see where they're going with this?
I mean, yes and no, right? It's like, I think Kelly said it well, like we do a bit more enterprise investment in the, call it robotics space, but robotics is kind of a catch-all term. Once a product is working, it's no longer called a robot. No one calls a washing machine a robot or an elevator a robot. 10 years from now, autonomous cars will not be called a robot, they'll be called a car. So in the enterprise, it's very, very easy to see what the use case is and what adoption looks like, and it's very ROI driven. In consumers, I mean, some of it's just virality, some of it is right place, right time, some of it is growth hacking. I mean, there's a million things that can make a consumer product successful or fail. So it's a little bit harder for us to invest in. We have, but it is harder for us to invest in the space.
Let's talk about security. When you guys are looking at a startup company that is doing a home healthcare or something that could be keeping track of your intimate details about how you live your lives, do you guys probe on that stuff, or is that a concern for you, or is it more, hey, let's see, this is an interesting product, let's see if we can take it and run with it in the right way?
I'll just give quick thoughts because I think these are such hard general questions. So much comes down to the DNA of, for that, the company and the brand, and I'll just give one quick example. It's no surprise why Amazon came out with the first device that listens in your home. Could you imagine the headlines if Google was the first one that had a device that was always listening? So Amazon, which is a very different company that sells e-commerce products and compute and storage, no one questioned them. And as soon as they opened the door, it allowed for the Googles and the Facebooks and the others. So I think so much of it comes down to just the DNA of the company and the brand and the image they portray, rather than the actual product and use case.
Go ahead.
So in general, we definitely look a lot at machine identity security related. It's related to robotics, related to IoT, it's related to all many different layers of solutions. But in general, the security and in a broader sense, GDPR, right, the requirement of privacy and all the recent development, there's definitely all companies are being very careful on to set up structure to think about how do you process the data you capture in the movie, the image, and everything, and from that regulatory angle. It's definitely from security and that perspective. One of the portfolio company we have that's Vanify that play in that space, essentially using private key, providing Internet of Things and robotics, different kind of security.
So I think privacy, GDPR compliant is extremely important, but I think what is more important for us to look at right now is autonomous car security. Because if you hack into a system, get people's private data, it sucks, but you're still alive, right? And in the future, if terrorists are able to hack into autonomous cars, like that is a huge, very, very dangerous thing for us. So I think as we're rolling out automotive cybersecurity is going to be huge. And then kind of tangentially, so we're invested in a drone company, which I consider under robotics, that does security in the sky. So they have drones that can detect within an airspace enemy flight, like aircraft, other drones, and they're able to capture it before anything happens.
It's our client, I think. Do you try? Not our client. All right, so thinking about just one example, one specific use case that you sort of mentioned, which is the autonomous car, which I think is as the kind of the ultimate, next wave robot. If you're an investor, how do you look at finding an opportunity there, or do you just say the problem is really hard? Like, are you looking at components or pieces, or is it leave it to someone else to figure out how to invest in that space?
So we've looked at it. We made one investment, which is also in the trucking space, a company called Grishin Robotics. We basically try to actually map it out, right? To understand which pieces of the puzzle are done or not architecturally. And we look at pieces like simulation software. We looked at pieces around the stack that was being made for perception software, for path planning, et cetera, et cetera. But we came to the conclusion there's areas along the way of sort of the classic self-driving car, which really need to be relatively tightly knit. And that has to do with a bunch of things. It has to do with the fact that there's already a value chain in place with OEMs, tier one suppliers that work for those OEMs. And so in some ways it's very difficult to break through if you don't have a solution that's either relatively complete or very, very discrete. If it's very, very discrete, you end up selling it to the tier ones or the tier twos that will sell to the OEMs. If it's like very, very full stack, you need a lot of capital. And so we have things like Waymo, where there's a lot of capital because they can do it and they can get away with it. So in the end, for sort of what I would call more the classic vehicle or light vehicle, we decided at this stage to step back a little bit. We continue looking at the space and the different pieces of architecture, as I mentioned before. From a use case perspective, we think there are areas where there's a lot of interesting things going on, right? More limited self-driving vehicles in certain environments, like vans within certain centers and within certain compounds, within certain corporate environments, et cetera, et cetera. We did the trucking investment because there was a belief, maybe similar to you guys, that in trucking there's probably the easiest use case of doing long haul to start with. So at the end of the day, that's where we stop. We really need to spend all the time on architecture, but also on the dynamics of the value chain. It's not like magically the OEMs and the tier ones, for example, in self-driving cars disappear overnight, and they have huge dependencies on each other today already. This is a little bit anecdotal, but obviously, like any VC, we always do customer feedback interviews and business development, feedback interviews, and shockingly enough, the strangest, I guess, customer feedback interviews I've had have been with either OEMs or tier one suppliers, where they literally throw the startups that we're doing the customer feedback for under the bus at the first sign. I've never seen anything like that. It's happened to me now a number of times. And so it really shows me it's an industry that has a huge amount of dependencies that have been established over decades. And so it's really, really difficult to break into it.
Go ahead.
I'll take a step. So I think that was well said. So as a firm and a fund, we've made a number of investments in the wider autonomous space. Some notable ones we've made kind of, as a high level, I think we believe there's going to be a few software stacks that emerge the winner in this space. So we have a large bet in a company called Zeus that happens to also be building their own card, but it's was a stellar team out of Stanford, and now they're 500, 600, 700 people doing a fully integrated, fully autonomous card. We've made a I think as a general thesis across the enterprise or whatever, there's this trend of taking infrastructure that's been built in the big tech companies and generalizing it for the rest of the world to use. So if you take simulation, Waymo hands down has the best simulator. It's called CardCraft. I think something like 2 to 3% of Waymo's total compute power, Alphabet's total compute power is just Waymo simulation. It's an insane number, probably billions of dollars to spend alone on that product. So we have a company called Applied Intuition, which is an insane mix of the best Silicon Valley talent and the best Detroit talent. The founders grew up in Detroit, and one was like the CEO of Y Combinator. So this really unique mix of Silicon Valley and Detroit DNA. And their view is to basically take the CardCraft product and then generalize that and sell that to the OEMs and tier ones of the world. And the interesting thing about simulation, one, it's a super sticky product, but most simulation products were meant for testing kind of hardware, for testing sensors in the physical world and kind of fluid dynamics, and that's like what ANSYS's bread and butter is about. There's no great simulator today to software to test dynamical systems or machine learning. So we thought there's a real interesting opportunity for a product like that. There has to be new sensors for autonomous, right? That's no secret. I mean, you have Velodyne, that's a multi-billion-dollar company that has a good but maybe not great product. You have a lot of tier ones that have built great products in radar and cameras. But what does kind of a next generation LiDAR look like? And there's a concept of this technology called FMCW, which is frequency modulated continuous wave. And it basically gives you velocity and speed and distance measurements. But we made an investment out of a team at Apple that looked at all the LiDAR sensors and didn't come to terms with any of them and wanted to spin out and create one themselves. So it's a company called Ava that we believe you'll see a few winners emerge in LiDAR that will become multi-billion-dollar companies. So we think there's never been a better time but today to start a company in this space. The industry has moved quite fast. There's been lots of capital. It will take a lot longer, and I think there'll be massive companies created along the way.
So I want to kind of pull a thread on something that Nuno mentioned on the reactions of the T1 suppliers in terms of how they're evaluating startups, and I wonder if are you seeing a changing attitude from, I guess, potential strategic partners in these spaces where there's the physical world where I guess startup land is coming after them, so trucking, parts for autonomous cars, even healthcare. Are people fighting the wave of startups, or are they open to them entering, and what does it take to enter?
I don't think they're fighting. I think there's a duality, right? There's, on the one hand, very entrenched value chains that have, even physical dependencies. I mean, suppliers co-locate with factories of the OEMs they're serving, etc. So I think there's that there, and that is very difficult to break in general. I mean, obviously, Mobileye might be a very good example of someone that actually broke through. And for that reason might not be the most liked company right now by the OEMs, right? So that's life, I guess. So that was a disruption. But on the other side, you have, I think everyone in the OEM space, and for sure tier ones that I know, it's very clear to them that there's a lot of pieces of their stack that they need. I mean, there's no way they can deliver it. Even to deliver things like level 3, I mean, they need pieces they don't have. And so there's this sort of type of competition and trying different angles and different things that I think is happening. Simulation software, we were hearing some interesting stories of how some OEMs were doing everything under the sun. They were working with tier ones on simulation, they were working with startups on simulation, and they were trying their own initiative on simulation. And I think part of it is not that they're trying to edge, it's just generally there's a little bit of reticence in saying this is the path because nobody really knows. One question that I have, it's actually maybe interesting to know what others feel about it, is what will differentiate some of these OEMs in the future? Is it the cabin is really nice inside? Is it they're faster? So what is it? Is it the software that will run L4 and L5 that will be different? If that's the case, if I'm the OEM, let's say I'm Volkswagen Group and I have Audi, Porsche, etc., I might as well actually own that software, right? Because that's what's going to differentiate a Porsche from, I don't know, a General Motors car, for example. So I don't know, I think there's still so many doubts. And when you talk to these guys, they have clear views on what they need to deliver over the next 5 to 10 years, but at the same time, when they jump into a world that basically uses very different metaphors. I think nobody really has sorry for my English, has a clue really of what's going to be the next thing. So they need to try everything, right? Will some of them kill innovation? It might happen. They'll buy the company early on, or they will ask their tier ones to buy the company and then supply them. Or maybe we will have breakthroughs. I think that for me is very clear. But that creates a lot of risk in investing in that space for us.
Do you, as investors, do you seek out? So you might talk to folks who might be customers. Do you then go out and when you're meeting with startups, are you thinking about those buyers as you're thinking about your investment decision? Maybe you're able to build a bridge.
That's absolutely one of the most critical thing to do is to talk to the end customers, customer diligence, right? For instance, in the warehouse automation space, it's critical to talk to actually the top 3PL guys, or the manufacturer guys, or the e-commerce fulfillment guys, to really understand their pain point. It's great if a startup is solving a problem, but is this problem urgent that the customer actually willing to pay for it? Or is this a project that the end customer want to play with everyone in the Silicon Valley in this space and test it out in a prolonged period and developing something internally also? It's that sense of urgency, that willingness to pay. You won't get it until you speak to the end customers.
All right, so I'm gonna shift the topic a little bit as we're running out of time here. So Kelly, maybe you can tell me, what are you optimistic for in the robotics world?
So I spoke about logistics before. I think there are a number of applications that can be done today that even a few years ago could not be done. And a lot of that is due to reinforcement learning and new methods within AI. So as an example, I was speaking a few weeks ago to someone who had built out a robotics company that sold to a large tech company back in 2012, 2013. It was a really good exit. And then now he's advising a number of new robotics startups. And he's saying that, wow, these startups are able to build what I built in like a year in just a matter of a few weeks. And that's largely due to what we can do now on the software side. So a company that we recently invested in the, let's call it logistics space, it's unannounced so far. They are using reinforcement learning to be able to do an application that previously could not be done by robots just because heuristics alone are not good enough. So I'm very optimistic for the ability of robots due to new software and new AI algorithms to be able to do things that we were never able to be done before. So,
and I don't know who the right responder to this one is, but you raise an interesting point, which is, so the way I see it, a lot of the methods, at least from a software perspective, I think have been around for a very long time. So what's changed? Is it the hardware, the communications, the vision, all that? You want to take that one?
So I look at this through a few different levels of evolution. It almost I see robotic almost linked to the different level of automation, like the 5-level autonomous driving, from human engaged, more of doing a manual task, to being partially automation with the system sort of being aware of what's going on in the environment, to eventually the level 5 of fully autonomous with data-driven decision, and actually the data are coming from the system, decisions are made by the system, action are being acted out by the robots. One example of progression with, to Kelly's point, with the AI progression in the picking and grabbing robotic section perspective. There's a robotic arm, and then there's a hand, and there's also the eyes, the brains of the robotic arm to do different picking. Think about picking up a strawberry or egg. It's extremely delicate, and to have that self-awareness on what you grab, or something up, and how are you going to drop it, in what angle, what would happen to it. It takes a lot of real-time, at-the-edge processing, computing, with computer vision and AI involved. And nowadays, with reinforcement learning, and that's the field is making a lot of progress.
So forgive me for, what's reinforcement learning? You want to take that one?
So I was going to add on to that because you were talking about picking and placing, and we're investors in a company called Kindred, and they're able to take kind of messy real world situations and be able to like pick and place and sort objects in the wild. So now they're a big issue at Amazon is that they used to have people manually picking things out of bins and putting things into bins, and these guys are able to do that now in a way that is fast enough and accurate enough to be effective in the real world. And another company that we're invested in is building basically the brains behind robotics, and it's called Vicarious. And we think that is extremely powerful because going forward, how the robot learns is going to be very powerful. With Vicarious, instead of just using deep learning, they're able to use kind of methodologies that match how the brain learns. So basically, they're using like generative probabilistic models similar to the brain to be able to use much less data than traditional deep learning and be able to generate kind of heuristics on how they should be able to do tasks in the future. So they're able to do tasks that they have not seen before, and I think that will be extremely powerful.
If you just wanted a quick reinforcement learning definition.
Yeah.
I mean, OpenAI has a great one, so if you just Google reinforcement learning, OpenAI, lots of interesting stuff on there. But it's a new method of deep learning, well, a semi-new method of deep learning. Without getting too technical, most deep learning you have to show like something like 10,000 cats to determine if something's a cat. This doesn't use a ton of training or labeled training data per se. There's something called a reward function, which is what you're solving for, and then if you do it right, there's a positive reward. If you do it wrongly, there's a negative reward. So it's a way to optimize a behavior without like showing it a ton of labeled training data.
That's how my son learns.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Very, very much raising a pet. So trying to bring some value to the entrepreneurs here. What can you tell them about the biggest challenges for them if they want to get into the robotics space? What are the challenges that they need to think about, and what are the unique issues that they need to really be focused on?
I think first and foremost, robotics involves hardware, and hardware, as we know, and this happens a lot, particularly with entrepreneurs who are coming from the software space. They're very used to sort of trial and error, and agile methods, and let's see what works and what not. I think prototyping, that's true. You can today do rapid prototyping. You can do things relatively quickly. But it's not true over the long term, even when you want to go into smaller batches and you want to see what happens with actual end customers. So it actually does resemble a little bit more what we software engineers would call, classic waterfall models. And so you have to actually sort of get it right. And once it's in production, you actually do have to get it right. One of the key issues we see when we talk to entrepreneurs very early stage is, have they allowed for the fact that they're going to have returns? That's, that they're going to have even worse than returns. They're going to have some malfunctions on some update that, for example, they do to the firmware of the thing. What would happen then if people, get bricked objects and hardware at their place? So there was a bunch of things that are very different from the classic software engineering mentality that we've sort of grown accustomed to, but not, I would say, the old style software engineering mentality. So in some ways, I think the old style still magically works. But at the other end, and I think you made this question, you asked us this earlier, what has changed? I mean, the cost of developing hardware has actually diminished. And I think we're going on a really nice cost curve. It's not like mobile apps type cost curve yet, but I think we'll get there. And so it's getting easier and easier to produce things. But normally what we see with entrepreneurs is they grossly underestimate the time to actually get to something that's at production quality, like production batches quality. They underestimate what issues they're going to have day one when they launch, and people get the hardware and they get the service, etc. And they actually then totally underestimated the cash they're going to need to get there. And so sort of saving cash, being ready for the fact that it might be difficult to go and raise a Series A if you haven't shown anything really, if you haven't even launched, which happens shockingly enough a lot in hardware, in the hardware space, is something that we always recommend.
I would just emphasize on, especially B2B robotic play, the importance of a value proposition ROI from a product market fit perspective. Just in general, if you're solving a really cool problem, doesn't mean that people will buy it, and that really the precision use case of one robot, how many human labor or how much more productive from the ROI perspective. That's one key thing to prove out as you're getting to A phase.
To echo that on the enterprise side, so what we really like is not necessarily just a terrific roboticist that has a product that they're looking for a market to fit it into. We like people who are looking holistically within a specific space and are designing a robot to be able to maximize the function that has the highest ROI. So going back to that product market fit. And then something else that we're pretty cautious of is that when you have a demo that works in a lab and it works really well, very, very often it doesn't work in the wild. And that's because there's just so many edge cases that you don't have in a lab, and like people are different in the wild, and objects are different in the wild, and packages are different in the wild. So it's something that just needs to be taken with a grain of salt when you see a video of a robot doing something very cool in a lab.
So last question. So a lot of my startup clients who are software companies, they hang out at WeWork or like a co-working space, and it's a great community for them to like get to know other people in their space. But they don't have access to 3D printers and component whatever. They don't have that lab space. Are there any communities or spaces like that in the Valley or elsewhere?
I would shout out to one of my portfolio companies that's named Fictive. So they do virtualized manufacturers, like a e-commerce space where Tesla could order a door being produced in prototype much faster than what the larger Flextronics could do. So it's very user-friendly for the startup community to try out, build out IoT devices, robotics, flying cars, anything you think about from mechanical stuff, to upload your CAD tool. They have the geometric computational AI assisting you throughout the process and giving you real-time pricing estimation based on the material and curvature you picked. Very seamless process. Silicon Valley does have a few startups in that regard helping other startups.
Yeah. I think Fictive is a good one. We have a company called Temp Automation that helps with PCBA designs and low-cost automation. Small rant, I am very against co-working spaces at the early stages and would not recommend them for companies. I think we as a fund even believe that's where great ideas go to die. It's great ideas when are really easy to kill, so I would not encourage anybody at the very early days to be in a co-working space. I think it's great after you're kind of off on your ways and it's a low cost, but great ideas die and you kind of revert to the mean in co-working spaces. Small rant, sorry.
All right, well, let's hear it for the panel. We have about 30 minutes of audience Q&A. We'd like to get as many questions in as possible. So if you have a question for the panel, come on up. We want to have you stand here because we have a recording mic here. And this is not a pitch event, so please no pitches. If you are going to deliver a pitch, we have a bouncer who's going to enforce that. Amy. That's our bouncer. So who's got a question for the panel? Come on down.
Luba.
Go for it, Luba.
Cool. Hi, thanks so much for a great hour of conversation and learning. Oops, that was an accident, sorry. So I'm wondering about ethics is my question, and who really determines ethics? I guess this is more of a overall question, but also follow up on that So there's obviously this huge wealth gap in America, and I'm sure that people are probably concerned about losing their jobs in the future, which we mentioned to robotics. Whose responsibility do you think that is to fix that problem? Is it anyone's responsibility? Is it the government's responsibility? Is it the companies creating the robotics? Like, what are we to do about this in the future for long term? I know this is really loaded and hard, and no one has the answer, obviously, but what do you guys think?
We have strong opinions on
Yeah.
I'm going to talk before the two people that have strong opinions talk, so I'll give you the very high-level answer. In terms of ethics, I'm only going to address the ethics piece. I think the workforce movement and who's responsible, etc. I'll leave to our pessimist in residence and to our optimist in residence. But on ethics, I would say the following. I do think that, unfortunately, ethics right now are in the hands of engineers. And it's not that engineers are bad at ethics. They just don't think through these things because that's not what they're meant to be thinking about, right? They're meant to be thinking through protocols, through algorithms, through things that work. And so at some point, someone needs to do this crossover. I was having a discussion the other day with a friend of mine who organized this great event, like with, people that are CEOs, in government, etc., around artificial intelligence and ethics. And the most senior person there was probably a CEO. Now, with all due respect to some of the great CEOs of Silicon Valley who are still technical in nature, the odds that they'll know what the hell their engineers are doing is zero, right? Like literally zero. And so at the end of the day, this is one of those efforts that will require actually quite a bit of funding for people to really start figuring out what is happening in terms of technical implementation and what are the implications of those technical implementations in ethics, right? Because that's the problem, right? We keep talking about algorithms that have, they are skewed, etc. Algorithms are whatever they are, right? I mean, if they're skewed, it's because the data is skewed or because something is wrong. But, who's thinking through that? My view is it needs to be thought from the bottom up. There needs to be actual funding around it. And that's, for me, the only way to solve the ethics issue. Now, I don't know if it's the optimist that wants to go first or the pessimist, but...
We should start end on a happy note.
On a happy note.
Which means I'm not the happy one. It's hard. I think we're going to have to figure it out. I mean, candidly, I think any answer has to start with an opportunity answer. It's we're very privileged living in San Francisco and New York and LA and other coastal areas are quite similar. And we tend to throw, like especially in Silicon Valley, we tend to throw around things like UBI being the answer, and let's just tax the big tech companies and give everyone an income. I don't think that's an answer. I think you have to start with an opportunity answer, whether it's retraining or new jobs or whatever. I actually think UBI, there's been small experiments. I think in the US it's probably pretty dangerous. You can imagine if we have UBI, that's kind of the anti-policy of immigration. If you give everyone free income, it's hard to let more immigrants in. So I think we're going to figure this out, but I think there's lots of stuff the government has to do, lots of stuff tech companies have to do. I don't think breaking up big tech is the answer. That's kind of like the zeitgeist right now, but we have a lot to figure out.
So the optimist point of view. So I think ethics is something that falls on all of us. And the way I think about it, or something that I commonly ask companies that are pitching products that look like they're directly replacing labor is exactly that question. It's something that I think about a lot, and when they have a thoughtful answer around it, I think that shows that they're thinking through the entire process. An example of something that looks like it would be replacing labor, say in the manufacturing world, is if you have a robot that's replacing X factor within the manufacturing space, it's replacing labor in this space. If you think about the fact that now it's making this part faster, you can take that original labor and either put it before that flow or after that flow, because now you can process, like, say 20% faster, because now you have more people on both sides of the input and the output. I also mentioned our investment in Embark Trucks, which now we're making lives better for long-haul truckers, and that's a job that people don't typically want to do. And I think in the long run, our workforce is going to change a bunch due to robotics. And I think in the long run, what's going to be important is no longer like hard lifting or repetitive tasks, but much more so soft skills. So your deductive reasoning and your ability to work in groups and basically empathy. So those will be much bigger indicators in the workforce than your ability to do specific kinds of maths that robots can do, or do like the simple logistical tasks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'll let the next question right here.
Well, thank you guys for this awesome panel. I really appreciate it, learned a lot. So you guys all mentioned a lot about really exciting stuff coming out of AI and then automation processes. So my question kind of ties into your answer, Kelly, for the last question. So what do you think about human-robotic integration? So like, as engineers, innovators, what are some of the obligations for us to develop something that will directly power workers? Some space we know that robots can't take over just yet. How do we make workers safer and more productive in that way?
So it's an interesting question, and I think it becomes a slippery slope. So I think you will see a wave of machine learning technologies supercharging kind of white collar like jobs, software engineers, data scientists. I mean, the most classic economic way to have higher wages is to increase productivity and have productivity growth. You get productivity growth through technology. So we're already saying, like, why are these software engineers paid so much today? I think that will only increase. I think for many jobs, though, it will kind of look like an upside down parabola. So if you take chess, for example, there was a period where the best combo of chess was an AI and a human, or a human-assisted AI. That didn't last that long until the best chess player was just a computer. So I do worry for some jobs you're going to have this period of high productivity growth, and it'll be beneficial. But we're going to get to a point where soon it's AI-assisted humans are not just better than the AI by themselves. So it's not going to happen everywhere. There's going to be jobs where soft skills and like deductive reasoning and human interaction are needed. But I think for many jobs, you're gonna see that upside down parabola.
I think one other element is the element of actual physicality of some of these augmentation pieces, because you did mention robotics as well, and they're helping me do my job, et cetera, et cetera. I think I'm generally optimistic about it, because there's a lot of things that people are doing today that is fundamentally strenuous, or difficult, or complex, or just generally disgusting. And in some ways, having something that helps you do that role, I'm incredibly positive. I think there is a side of me that says then the bar for delivery of those systems is much higher, because you can't, these are systems that have a lot of power. So in some ways, if, for example, I get injured because I'm using the system, even if incorrectly, that's a huge issue of liability. But I'm generally very, very, very optimistic about the whole physical space as well, and that augmentation. Exoskeletons, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're going to see really, really cool stuff around.
Hi, thank you so much for the panel discussion. I have a little tactical type of question. I know Kelly and Elana mentioned that in order for enterprises to be receptive of new robotics technology, they really look at the ROI from investing or implementing this new robotic technology. Aside from like marginal increase in revenue and decrease in cost, are there any like creative ways that the startups that you have seen portrays ROI aspect for the enterprises?
I'll tackle this question with one example. In the retail space, right, the key, there's a few key pain points every retailer is trying to solve. Number one, inventory compliance, inventory management, out of stock. Number two, employee efficiency. Number three, customer experience. And once you bring a robot in for automating some of the inventory awareness, that's not only helping company in retail space lifting their top line and cutting their expense, but in addition, they have this ocean, like oil as gold oil of data. And with this data, you can start to think about a creative way of engaging with customer experience, with engaging with CPG in terms of helping them with the force of the matrix, even with advertising, right? How do you make it more effective? You can, with real-time data, track more of consumers' behavior in that respect. That's one example of ROI beyond just productivity and cost reduction.
So I'm going to echo the importance of the customer experience here. I would have talked a lot to that point. And I think something else that's extremely important beyond just ROI is the timeline of integration. So it's something that is marginally better over however many years, and you can realize that ROI, but if it's something that's going to be a huge headache for management, you're going to overhaul a bunch of systems, like that could be a huge drag that causes the deal never to get done with the customer.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julian from InOrbit. Thank you very much for the panel. It's been really interesting. I think I have an easy one here for you. I just wanted to know from your point of view, how do you see the market in terms of size, number of units for autonomous robots, service robots, particularly interested in B2B, but also generally in the next 3, 5, 10 years? How do you see the numbers, and what is the growth that you see and that you expect?
That's an easy one, right? Do you have a difficult one? I don't know. I think ultimately we'll go to multiple devices by person, but I don't think it will happen certainly in the next 5 years. I would suspect maybe not even the next 10. I have no view, but I do think the attach rates per human being over the long term are going to be significant.
I guess it's a top-down view and bottom-up view. If I look at it through, especially for B2B perspective, through sector, vertical sector by vertical sector, right? There's probably you can do a top-down view in terms of I think if I remember correctly, there's let's say 30,000 large retail stores, and from the number of retail stores, and think about the number of robot you need in the store, and robot that you need in the back office, and robot you need in the warehouse automation and in the logistics space, you can kind of estimate the number. I think Six River Public said that last Black Friday, their transportation robot in the warehouse space, they had 1 million items that's transported by the robots, by a few hundred robots during the Black Friday, that one day event. I don't have an overall answer for you, but I think it's like puzzle, piecing it up for different verticals, you get a sense for the B2B space.
Thank you.
As investors, do you have any interest or appetite for the healthcare space in robotics? And if yes, which sector specifically of the space are you interested in? Or you see deal flow in?
I mean, so yes, healthcare is 20% of GDP, right? And it's only grown by the year. So one day we may all end up working in healthcare if we don't fix the problems. And it's also rising prices, so lots of things to be solved in healthcare. I mean, in terms of robotics in healthcare, I think there's lots of interesting work to be done. We were a large investor as Series A co-leads in a company called Auris Health, which created basically a competitor to Da Vinci, which is the intuitive surgical robotics company. They got bought last month by J&J for just under $6 billion. So, one of the largest private outcomes in venture ever. But I think there's other things like that are quite interesting. So tons of interesting stuff in healthcare.
We spend a lot of time. We normally don't. There will be exceptions, I'm sure, in the future, but normally we don't like things that need to go through FDA approval, etc. So we stay away from hardcore healthcare. We do spend a significant amount of time around well-being and fitness for obvious reasons, right? I mean, if you look at things like Peloton, etc., and what's happened in that space, that's been pretty dramatic. I think it's unavoidable, I guess, to Brendan's point, that you'll have more and more discrete bets by venture firms like ourselves that are not focused on healthcare, that will start doing healthcare investments, sort of unavoidable. It's such a huge problem. At some point, we need to start making our own bets.
Thank you. My name is Valeri, co-founder. My question is, what is the best strategy for startup to approach investors, for startup like us? For example, my startup developed a new technology of over-the-air charging technology, which is different of existing standards like PMA or QE. And so question is, what is the best approach for us? Because when I started to talk to some angel investors and even some VC fund, they are a little bit confused because it's not a product, though we have a working prototype. But that kind of technology which allows us to charge not just objects which is in place, but also moving objects.
I'm going to give a relatively generic answer, but I think the first thing is you need to understand it's sort of what I call the horses for courses question, right? What type of investors would invest in this type of core technology that is not productized? Very unlikely it will be venture capital firms, right? Actually, very unlikely it would be micro venture capital firms. Maybe some angels that are domain experts in your area that understand that what you've come through is quite a breakthrough. Maybe people that are willing to give you capital and also be advisors to your company. Maybe some strategic companies that see a huge amount of value in that, although then you have the issue around protection of your IP, et cetera, et cetera. But that's sort of question number one. You need to figure out what would be the right realm of investors that I would go and talk to. The second thing, once you know that realm, understand who's active, who's not active, what sort of size of checks do they do or not, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you'd be shocked. Still to this day, I mean, we're a Sand Hill Road venture firm that has a well-known portfolio. Our website's not very good, I have to admit. But we have a well-known portfolio. You can Google us all day long. You can Google our founding partner. You can Google me. You can see me on LinkedIn, whatever. And they come to us, and they have no bloody clue who we are, right? And it's like, come on, guys, just do your homework, right? If you're trying to pitch me, if you're sending me an email on an industrial play or a core tech play that you're going to license to someone, you have not looked at what we've invested in, right? Basically. So that's number two. Really do your homework, figure out within that realm, within that universe of potential investors, what do they do, what size of checks, how do they behave, et cetera, et cetera. Third, how do you get the intro? Warm intros are always the best. Unfortunately today I'll have to leave early, so if anyone wants to talk to me, do send me a LinkedIn invite and say that you met me here tonight, because that's the only way I have to say that, okay, these guys physically were in the same space as me, right? Okay, so that's sort of level 2, level 3, but ideally, if you know someone I know really well that is willing to vouch for you, and it fits my thesis, by the way, it apparently does not, that's the best way. That's the best way by far. Sending just requests on LinkedIn, I have no clue who you are, you don't explain to me who you are, cool. So I think that's the 3 different things I would do. Figure out what type of investors, figure out how active these people are, and figure out how you get to them.
Just add really quick. I will slightly expand on the warm intros because I've heard lots of pushback and people realize it's like a little bit unfair to challenge it. I think warm intros, we do look for warm intros, and the logic behind that is our whole job is to listen to new ideas and pitches and new innovations. And if you can't, and if a founder or a person cannot find a warm intro to an investor whose only job is to listen to you, it is harder to believe that you can find customers and people to buy your product. So in some sense, it is a proxy for that. It's not a perfect proxy, but there is a method to the madness of why investors do like warm intros.
Same guys.
And we have also invested in cold intros too, just as an
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Not only, but there's a proxy.
Hi, my name is Chen. As just a normal consumer, what I care is one day robot can come to my home and benefit my daily life, make me lazy and don't need to do housework, don't need to cooking, living. And when I get old, they will help me to do also some routine work. That's I agree, for the elderly, right? Maybe the first area we enter for the consumer side. But I'm also curious to know in other areas in the consumer robotics, what's the timeline in different type of the robotics and what's the pinpoint? And also, if you invest now, and for the investor, do you anticipate how you say successful investment in the next 5 years? I sell it to another big company, that means my investment is successful, or we think we can have good revenue like in next 5 years in different areas of consumer robotics.
So we're Series A investors, so we normally think about things that have a 5 to 10 year timeline in front of us, ideally 5 to 7 years, let's say. So we're not looking at things that are going to change the world probably within 15, 20 years. If it's clear that it's not going to be something that will happen within a timeline that fits our fund time, that fits basically, the market as we can see it, et cetera, because funds also normally have a timeline to them, right? And it depends on funds, but normally it's 10 years, and then there's extensions and all those sorts of things. So we want the company to actually, we want the company to exit within that timeline, right? So, and at the point we're investing, it might be the end of our investment period, so it might be after 4 or 5 years, so it means like we have another 5 years plus a couple of extensions ahead of us. So we'd expect the company to exit within that timeline again, right? So that's sort of the horizon that we're thinking of in terms of the future. We are because we do consumer, and everyone, I think at the table here said consumer is really, really difficult. We're very product-driven people, so we start with use cases. So we start like, what's the actual latent demand or need that's being served? Is this actually big enough? Is there momentum around it? And we try and find all sorts of proxies. Sometimes the market already exists, sometimes the market doesn't exist at all. We do a lot of market analysis. Is the value chain going to allow things like this to come in, right? For example, in the home right now, you have a huge battle, I'd say even a war maybe for the home, with Google, with Amazon. Facebook tried, we'll see what happens. I think it's the wrong time for them to try. Maybe they'll come back. Apple definitely needs to be more aggressive around it. I mean, it's not shocking that our 2 investments in the home were bought by Amazon. Our 2 investments in home were bought by Amazon, Ring and Europe, right? I mean, it's like, so right now, if we are an investor, we need to start figuring out, okay, which areas will we still have that are innovative, where you'll have startups that really come into the home or the externality of the home. People always forget about the outside of the home, right? That's why Ringo actually was bought, right? Are there things there that we don't think the big guys are going to address themselves, or that the big guys won't just buy very early on, right? Where they will let some businesses exist. So from our perspective, things that help you in the home, that's how we would think through that. Not things just that help you in the home, but things that startups have a chance of winning and exiting within the next 5 to 7 years. So that's how, very simplistically, we would look at it.
Do we have real examples, like which areas will be more promising?
That's part of our secret sauce in some ways, right? So
okay. Thank you.
Next.
Yes. My name's Gloria De Felix. Actually, I have my own robotics company. I have a use case that I'm going to be doing a prototype for this year, and hopefully I'll be pitching to you guys in a few months. One of the issues I have, so I've been dabbling in robotics and as a hobbyist, and I keep thinking, what is the next, business idea? I want to get into this space, right? And so one of the issues I have is when I see companies like Baxter, Curie, and like Jibo, like these companies, I love these companies, right? When they came out, I'm like, oh, this is great. I wish I had come up with that. And another company is called TikTok Robotics. That was a spin-off out of Google. I mean, these people had a bunch of great ideas. They had funding, they had resources, they had connections. And when I found out TikTok Robotics folded, that was very disillusioning for me. What's cool is I actually inherited 2 robots from them. So I'm working off of their a couple of their platforms. But it actually disturbs me when I see robotic companies fold, really awesome ideas fold like that. So as an entrepreneur in this space, I guess I just want to hear some words of encouragement to at least, keep trying within this space. It looks like there's opportunities and there's funding, but I'm just wondering, what do I do with that information when I see awesome companies fold like that?
We have this saying, so I'm going to give you probably not a very structured answer. We have this saying that there's different types of robotics companies, right? There's what we call the YouTube robotics companies. They have cool stuff on YouTube. God knows if they actually have any business, but they have really cool stuff on YouTube. Then you have, companies that are really driven by research, and it's really cool, but they're not really solving any problem. I mean, it's just, and some of these people will raise a lot of money, right? Because either the person's incredibly convincing in their pitch, the CEO and founder, or because there's momentum behind the space, etc., etc. And then very, very few of them will have businesses, right? I don't think there's anything very different about hardware. Well, the two things that are probably different about hardware is timelines are still different. It still takes a little bit longer. And secondly, the capital intensity normally is higher. And as I said, I think that will change also over time. But right now, that's still true that it's a little bit different. So people will have to raise more money to get to a certain level. What's not different is there are people that are great at executing and there are people that are not. Right? And so a lot of the companies that failed, to be honest, I won't name names, but I have my own views. They failed sheerly on execution, right? They had never had the right execution. They were thinking everything under the sun at the same time. They were trying to solve all the problems of the world with one robot. And sometimes it doesn't work. And it's very bad, but companies fail all the time. Big companies fail all the time, even in software as well. So it's not like this is a unique thing. So giving you the optimistic answer, which I think is what you asked for. If you stick to it, if you have the execution drive, if you are lean, certainly at the beginning of your path, right, you have a shot. And then after that, we'll see if there's market or not. One thing I've seen with a lot of entrepreneurs is even sometimes after 3-4 years at it, they keep saying they found product market fit, but no such thing has been found. As I always say, it's like, in their minds they found it, but it's not scalable, it's not scaling. Product market fit, I always say, is actually not a snapshot, it's dynamic. Product market fit changes over time, so if you get to 1 million users is one thing, you get to 10 million, it's a different thing, if it's 100 million, it's a different thing. So in some ways, I think that's a little bit what I would say to you. If you can go through these stages, if you can really commit to it, but at the same time being very honest with yourself, if there's really product there or not, and if there isn't, maybe there's a need to pivot, and you still have capital left to pivot with. That's why lean is important. Or at some point you say, maybe this is not it. Maybe I'm going to do something else altogether. Right? And so having that, I think, flexibility, but at the same time, that drive for me is pretty important. But I don't think that's different from any other class of entrepreneurship.
I'll give a quick answer. So on the positive side, I think I do believe sci-fi is the best predictor of the future. There's always the temporal time question, but I mean, if you look at the dot-com bust, every one of those ideas worked. Almost every single dumb idea in '99 in software became a billion-dollar company. The iPhone, I forget the company's name, but there was an iPhone in the early '90s that spun out of Apple that raised tons of money. There was a movie on it recently, and it failed. But now the iPhone is a billion of it. So I think most of it is just a time question, whether you were too early or not too early. But I think most of these things will work. There's a future for most of these. We're focusing on the robotics piece, but like how many search engines or social networks or photo sharing apps failed? There's one Instagram and one Snapchat and one YouTube, but there were 100 attempts. Just because 100 things failed in one sector of robotics doesn't mean that it's not going to be a massive outcome success.
All right, panel, we have time for one last question and some quick answers. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Chakra. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. So as much as I do want to invest in robotic startups, I just have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask many people. So because of robotics coming into our daily lives, a lot of jobs will be lost in future. Maybe our kids or our kids may not find jobs at all. So in this case, do you think the government should come up with some kind of tax, like a cloud tax, or make automation tax, or outsourcing tax, or some such kind of taxes, and then use that money to pay towards universal basic income?
I mean,
I'll take that.
Really quick, won't dwell on this. I cannot be a huge believer in universal basic income. I think there's a whole bunch of latent tertiary effects that if we have a UBI, we're going to reduce immigration in this country. The one thing that makes the U.S. what it is immigration. So I would do almost anything to not hurt immigration policies. In terms of a robot tax, maybe we get there. I mean, I don't have the answer to this. I think in the near term we can't do that. I'm of the belief you don't want to levy any tax to hurt innovation in the near term. Long term, I maybe foresee it, but for most technological revolutions, there's always been some displacement, and there's always been new jobs and more jobs created. I'm actually much more worried about the software taking jobs than robotics and hardware taking jobs. Once you have like a CapEx expenditure cycle, these things just take time. You're not going to have 8 million robots wipe out 100 million jobs overnight. CapEx will give some some delay in this. So I tend to lose much more sleep on software taking jobs than robotics and hardware taking jobs.
Let's give it up for the panel. And let's do it for our awesome moderator, Eric Hansen. Of course, let's hear it for our sponsor, Wilmer Hale, all our partners, our video team, and our event team. Applause. The video will be on our YouTube channel within 48 hours, right, Tim? youtube.com/ideaipo. As a courtesy to Wilmer Hale, we would like to leave the building 10 minutes before 9. You can keep the conversation going out in the parking lot, or you can join me at the Park James Hotel, 1400 El Camino Real. I'll be there by 9:20. I'm not sure if anyone here will be going, but maybe you can talk them into it. BYOB, buy your own beverage. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.